Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined today by Darren Headrick, Kentucky baseball radio play-by-play man. We're going to talk about the scalding hot Kentucky Wildcats. Year two of Kentucky just getting off to a really quick start in SEC play. We're going to talk to Darren about how that has come to be. We're going to project forward a little bit into the future and talk about what it might look like as the schedule gets a little bit tougher for Kentucky. It's a cauldron in the SEC. We know that to be the case. So we're going to talk about that path forward. We'll get to all that in just a second. But first, I have to let you know that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Pitch Logic, the system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from youth leagues to the big leagues. The easy-to-use and affordable technology makes the platform accessible to every player at every level. All the metrics and features used at the highest level. See pitchlogic.com for more information. Darren, first off, I appreciate you joining us today. We're coming together on Wednesday morning and kind of mourning the loss of the rivalry game against Louisville this week, not getting to see what would have been an outstanding game between those rivals. But so I appreciate you making time for me instead.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Joe. I appreciate you having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to talk about these Wildcats. And yeah, everybody's disappointed in the Bluegrass that we weren't able to get this game in this week. But obviously, I'm sure folks understand the tragic events unfolding with the severe weather and everything. And we were affected here in Lexington and areas too. So, our thoughts are with the folks that are trying to get power restored or damage repaired this morning. But yeah, I was like you. I was looking forward to the Cats and Cards. It was going to be an entertaining game, but we'll see if we can get it rescheduled down the road. So not giving up on it yet.
Yeah, hopefully. Here's hoping. Let's talk about the season so far. 8-1 in SEC play. The winners of 12 of their last 13, 24-4 overall. Just about any way you look at it, the Cats have had one heck of a start to the 2024 season. Let me start off with the broadest possible question. Why?
Well, I think the biggest thing right now is just the fact the team is healthy. They've gotten Grant Smith back playing great at short. He's dealt with a hamstring injury. Ryan Waldschmidt had the offseason ACL tear. He's back and healthy at the top of the lineup. So they're producing. And again, Coach Mingione and his staff have done a great job with the recruiting class, the freshman class, but also the transfer portal class for the second straight year. And they're getting production from guys like Mitchell Daly, who came from Texas. Nick Lopez from Southern Cal has been a huge addition to the order. So the offense is clicking on all cylinders. And I think the biggest thing, and it's not a surprise to those of us in Lexington who saw them last year, but the pitching rotation on the weekend has already settled in. Travis Smith has been banged up, so Trey Boozer has started the last two Fridays, but Travis continues to develop in that Friday night role. Dominic Nyman has been an incredible addition to this starting rotation, pitching on Saturdays. And then Mason Moore is just continuing to grow as a pitcher in that Sunday role. He's 6-0 in 7 starts, and that's no coincidence. And so I think it's just a number of things that's helped them produce another historic starts with sweeps over Georgia and the first ever program sweep over Ole Miss in Oxford.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for the start, too, when you consider that, excuse me, as you alluded to, not everything has gone according to plan. There's been players nicked up there, Travis Smith on Fridays, the position players. So I think there's something to be said for this group being able to keep its head above water while it kind of got right. And now you're seeing the fruits of that labor where it feels like they're hitting their stride now that they're back at full strength, thanks to the work that was put in by, I think back to the lineup depth, guys stepping in and just getting contributions from 12, 13, 14 guys. That has allowed them to get to this point, and now they're kind of loaded for bear the rest of the way.
No, you're exactly right. And I think about some of the depth that's been tested. We've seen a freshman start at shortstop while Grant was out with the hamstring injury, Caius Gargett, and he did a fine job. We've seen them start a freshman in the outfield on opening day in Griffin Cameron. And there's another freshman, Eli Small, who's already contributed. But I also think about Patrick Herrera, who has started some in the outfield. He came in for James McCoy, or actually Ryan Waldschmidt was out. So Herrera started on the Tuesday night game against Miami of Ohio and was on base 6 times, 4 walks, 2 hit by pitches. And then you have James McCoy, who I mentioned a minute ago. He's hitting the ball extremely well, had an awesome weekend in Oxford. Nolan McCarthy continues to hit well. So the lineup is deep now. it goes 1 through 9. And with Grant Smith hitting in that 9 hole, he flips the batting order around again to the top. So right now, it's just like you said, it's a team clicking on all cylinders. They're playing confident. They believe in themselves. And the strong start to the SEC play reflects that.
When you look back at the shape of the season, there was the one blip against Kennesaw State where they had two games they just didn't play well. Did you perceive anything after that Kennesaw series of switch being flipped or something changing that kind of got the team back on track? Because I remember looking at those results and thinking, "Who boy, like that's not a great weekend." But they really seem to have put it behind them really quickly.
Yeah, I think part of it, Joe, is just sort of college baseball, right? It's just the sport. Like you sweep the team in Lipscomb that's favored to win Kennesaw's league. You sweep them in dominant fashion. Then you come back and you lose 2 out of 3 to Kennesaw State. Well, Kentucky was banged up. They didn't have Ryan Waldschmidt very much in that series. They didn't have Grant Smith, and they were missing some other guys in that weekend series. But, I go back and look at it. Okay, the Friday night game, the score didn't look good at the end of the night, but it was 5-1 in the 8th inning. And Kentucky really didn't use any of their high leverage bullpen guys in that game because they were down and it kind of got out of hand. And then, things didn't go well for Nyman in his start on Saturday. But then they come back on Sunday, Mason Moore start, and win that game 5-2. And I know Coach Mingione, after that game, talked to the team, and when he come out of it, he told the media and he told us on his radio show, he said, "Hey, I've got my team back. I feel like I've got these guys back where they need to be." So one, I would say coming out of Kennesaw, they started getting healthy again. That was the biggest part of it. But then number two, I think there was a switch flipped, and they've turned this around, and they understand that you can't just go out and take the field and teams roll over for you. You have to go out there and compete every day and play hard. That's what this team has done. Since then, they've bought into the "let's get weird" mantra that they use all the time. Their energy in the dugout is tremendous. And like Coach Minge said, this is a team that is on the attack, and they have been that way since the Kennesaw series.
Let's jump into some individual player stuff. Nick Lopez has been such a catalyst. To what extent did you expect this kind of performance from Nick Lopez, and what can you tell us about what he's done so far?
Coach Mingione and his staff just continue to rave about Nick, and from what we've seen, I think the most impressive thing for me, Joe, is just his ability to hit to all fields. Coach Mingione describes him as hitterish. He just finds a way. And the fact that he's a switch hitter who has already homered from both sides of the plate, leads the team in doubles, and he's got that personality that just fits in with this group. He's been a great addition to the locker room, and he has fit right into that DH role in the lineup. And he's made a huge difference. He impacts the ball and he impacts the lineup when he's at the plate. And we've just seen him spray the ball to all fields, line drives, and just his overall approach has been really fun to watch. And it's been a huge piece to this lineup for sure. There's no doubt.
Great mustache too. That can't
no
be.
Doubt. I can't forget the mustache. Yeah,
of course. This next one is not so much of a question as it is a statement that I'm sure you'll agree with. It's hard to imagine a quieter, more overlooked, excellent player than Emilien Pitre, just given what he provides defensively. He's a shortstop level athlete who's playing second base. Yes. He's great feel to hit, has more pop than you think. Steals bases. So it's just hard to imagine something going more under the radar than how excellent he's been the last 2 years.
Yeah, we've started describing him as sort of that unassuming superstar on this team. And I think he's just scratching the surface of what he can be as a finished product. He is still growing. We tell the story all the time of when he stepped on campus. He was 135, 140 pounds, and he continues to get stronger, and he's putting on the muscle and the weight in a good way. Obviously, he's got a strong arm, like you mentioned. He's a shortstop playing second base. But I think it's just his overall demeanor, Joe. He's just so even keel. And I even asked him on a pregame interview this year, I said, what are some of the mental checklists that you go through before you hit that allows you to be so even? We never really see emotion. He obviously celebrates with his teammates, but we've never seen him get frustrated on the field. And I asked him about his mental checklist, and he just told me it's normally like I'm making sure my feet are where they're supposed to be. I'm going through all the things that I can control, and that's the biggest thing for him is he focuses on what he can control, and obviously his talent level. Coach Mingione raves about his instincts on the bases, how he reads pitchers and is able to just take off. His launch, his explosiveness off the bases is elite, and his pop times getting from home to first base on ground balls or balls in play is at an elite level. I think I'm like you. I think he's a superstar already. I think he's a young man that can get to the major leagues, barring something catastrophic, unforeseen. I think he's a guy that can get there, and he has been so much fun to watch develop. Taught himself English. This is the kind of guy we're talking about. Taught himself English. He's basically on his own here in Lexington. I don't think he's. I don't think he'd mind me saying this. I don't think he's got a driver's license. I think his teammates take him anywhere he needs to go or picks him up at the airport. So, but to be on his own here and teaching himself English and to become the player he is has just been really fun to watch. It's been a pleasure to get to know Emilien while he's been in Lexington, no doubt.
Yeah, it's a great point about the language barrier. For those who don't know, he's French Canadian, and so comes with that language barrier. And just imagine if you're a listener, imagine how disorienting it would be if we dropped you off in the Dominican Republic during summer ball and said, "Here you go," and oh, by the way, you're playing in the toughest league in this country, and good luck. And there's a lot of pressure here. How disorienting it would be to not be in your home environment and thrive that way. So I always, we see it all over the place. There are players that, come from Latin America who have to learn English in college baseball, but just anybody who I have so much respect for anybody that has to do that, because I think we consistently underestimate how difficult that is to not just be riddled with things. I'd be riddled with anxiety like all the time about I don't know how to, it's just, anyway, just impressive. Let's talk about the mound.
Sure.
You mentioned Dominic Nyman's name. You never know how a transfer from a lower conference, as good as he was at Central Connecticut, you just never know how it's going to translate to the SEC. But given the results so far so good. What do you think has allowed Nyman to succeed to the extent he has, even though he's not necessarily a stereotypical, SEC weekend workhorse guy?
I think the biggest thing for Dom is just this dog mentality that he has on the mound. He is just a competitor. So that's number one. He goes on the attack with an attitude. But if you want to get more into the technical aspects of it, I think it's just the spin on the ball, his fastball moves, the breaking pitch moves. He does a really good job, and I think he's even getting better at this of tunneling everything. And for those listening who may wonder what that means, it just basically means his stuff is coming out of the hand around the same spot. So it makes it really hard for hitters to read whether it's his fastball or a slider or a changeup, because it's all coming out of the same spot, and they've got to react quickly to the different spins. But he has done a great job of dominating this year. He's run into some bad luck. The last couple of weekends, we've seen some balls drop in the outfield or maybe just a hop that was beyond the reach of a glove somewhere. So he's run into a little bad luck, as pitchers will have from time to time. But he has still been a big addition to that weekend rotation. But I think in addition to just his ability to pitch, Joe, it's just this dog attacking mentality on the mound that's been big for him. And I want to credit Coach Roselle and the development staff, the player development staff. They've got Trevor Fitz and Logan Salo is a graduate assistant this year, but even the prior player development staff have done a great job with the portal. I think about Tyler Guilfoyle coming from the mid-majors and suddenly becoming one of the huge stars. Sean Harney's another one on this Kentucky pitching staff, and they found another one now with Dominic Nyman.
Yeah, such a good call. It's a dice roll is not giving the player development people enough credit, but in the portal, it's just, we see it all the time that, it's like some guys work, some guys don't. And there's a skill to finding the ones who do. Now, are there things you can't anticipate, factors that, whatever? Sure, of course. but you can kind of reduce your risk by doing the homework, and the staff has done an incredible job with that for sure.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I would echo that 100%.
Let's talk about Mason Moore in transition to his transition to the rotation this year. It hasn't always been easy so far this season. It felt like he's kind of worked through some things, but you look at the overall numbers and they're right where you kind of expect them to be. It seems a little bit like he's been as good as advertised in that transition.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about him. I love talking about Mason Moore because I've had the pleasure of watching him grow when he first stepped on campus. And I think the one thing I would want people to know about Mason is, as good as he looks at times on the mound and as dominant as he has been at times, he is still really young as a pitcher. I don't like to use this because I don't want the guys to get offended by it, but I think he's still a relative baby when it comes to being an overall pitcher. And the reason I say that is you think back to his high school. He was a basketball player in high school that was also pitching some with the baseball team. And then as he continued to grow in high school and he grew into his body and developed, he realized, hey, I can be a pitcher. This might be the avenue to go. But he's also a dude that can slam dunk the basketball and has been in some pretty big games on the hardwood. So he's transitioned now. He's all baseball, and he's growing as a pitcher. He went and took his lumps in some pretty big games as a freshman in some spots that maybe he wasn't quite ready for then, but it was great experience. And then last year we saw him come out of the bullpen and get stronger and more confident. And I think the biggest thing from his pitching, Joe, is the fact that, he's always had the sinker fastball that Indiana's coach described as a 94-mile-an-hour bowling ball. And that's just been one of my favorite descriptions of how Mason's fastball sinks on hitters. But he's also started landing the breaking ball for strikes. And now that he's landing his breaking ball, he's got the changeup and the sinker. It's taken him to a whole new level. And we saw him dominate out of the bullpen at the end of last year. Now, as a Sunday starter, he's had to learn how to be a starter, how to pace himself, but also stay on the attack. And pacing yourself doesn't mean that you don't want to throw your fastball at 94 and instead 92. And that's something that he's had to learn as well. You can still ram it in there, but pacing yourself just more and don't exert everything 110% on every single pitch. And so he's learned that balance. Against Missouri, didn't have his best stuff, still worked through a good start, gave his team a chance to win, which they did. Against Ole Miss, got hit by a line drive comebacker on his pitching elbow in the first inning and still went 5 innings and only gave up a run on 2 hits. So that just shows the potential he has, but also the growth that he is currently in. We'll use that term again, the development that he's continuing to process through.
He also gives off that he's still kind of a baby pitching wise because he's got one of those baby faces, right? You pass him, and folks like you and I, Darren, who are getting further and further away from our own college days, right?
Right.
We passed him and like, how old is that guy? How is it possible he's out here? But no, it's a great point. Like one of those guys who just kind of seems to get exponentially better each time, just because it's like when children are learning, their brains are just like sponges. Like he's kind of like the same way, where he's just smoothing out some of those raw edges.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
In the offseason, I remember talking to Coach Minge, and his biggest concern was, what are the bullpen roles, especially with moving Mason to the rotation? You're losing somebody who was dominant at times, the back end, so you've got a big hole there. How do we feel about the bullpen right now? How has that gone, finding guys for specific roles? How confident is the coaching staff in what they have?
I think the coaching staff's very confident in what they have right now, but the biggest thing there too is trying to get healthy. Ryan Hagenau is continuing on the road back. We haven't seen him since the start of the season as he's dealt with some injuries, but he would be a huge addition. I think we're starting to see roles and guys settling into roles. You have Cameron O'Brien, the transfer, who's come in. He's kind of the fireman when they're in some jams, but they're not quite where they can get to their closer, maybe those middle innings. He'll come in, get them out of a bases loaded jam or runners on. Evan Byers is a nice change of speed from that left side. And then you've got Johnny Hummel, who has emerged as the closer. He's got an outstanding breaking ball in addition to the fastball. Robert Hogan, the transfer from Texas A&M's got a wipeout slider. He commands that pitch very well, and he's got multiple speeds with it too. So he can change velos on that breaking ball. So they feel really confident about some of the weapons. Jackson Novey from the left side has been used in some high leverage spots. So they feel really good about where some things are, and getting Ryan Hagenau back would just take them to an entirely another level in terms of the overall depth and health of the bullpen.
Yeah, here's to hoping Ryan Hagenau back on the mound at some point soon and healthy. He's one of my favorite people in the league to talk to. Like, he's super bright guy, super smart guy, funny. Like, it's hard not to root for guys like that. So yeah, certainly hoping to see him back on the mound at some point. The last thing, Darren, is no disrespect to Georgia, Missouri, Ole Miss, but we know the most difficult part of the schedule is still in front of them.
Right.
How do you anticipate the experience of last year and the start they're off this year helping them as they go into that gauntlet, understanding that you're probably not going to go, win 8 out of 9 in your next segments of 9 games against the schedule. Losses are just going to happen in this league.
Yeah, I think it's been put best to me by various coaches and other announcers in the league. The SEC is such a grind that you kind of boil it down to, you've got to protect your home field. You want to win the series at home and then not get swept on the road. Well, Kentucky has been plus to that category so far through 3 weeks. But like you said, they've got a tough Alabama team this weekend, and then the gauntlet really starts. They have to go to Auburn, which early in the season looked like it was going to be a tough series. I know Auburn's had their struggles, and I'm sure the Tigers are going to be a very hungry and desperate team when Kentucky goes down there. So there's a tough series. Then you dive into the Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas, and Vandy gauntlet on the back half of the season. So, I think what excites me about the upcoming schedule, Joe, is I remember times last year where they faced a similar gauntlet, and a lot of folks outside of Lexington were like, oh, they're going to go 0-9. This is the stretch that gets Kentucky. And they came out of it 5-4. And that's what excites me about the potential of this year's team. Well, a lot of those key guys coming back this year, the portal additions, can they do a similar run that they did last year against a gauntlet like that? Especially when you think about, hey, that Tennessee series is big, but it's in Lexington. Vanderbilt's going to be a really tough challenge, but it's in Lexington. So you look at some of those things, and it excites me to see what this team can do against that similar gauntlet that they had last year. Can they go on a similar run? I'm excited to see them.
Yeah, same. Totally agree. I've said it a couple times already the last couple weeks that anybody who thought that Kentucky's run last season was some sort of, a fluke is maybe not the right word, but just kind of some amalgamation of older team, conducive schedule. The RPI loved them, all that kind of stuff. I think has learned this year that they're sorely mistaken. This team is playing well. I'm certainly excited as well to see what they do down the stretch. Darren, I appreciate you taking some time for us this morning and joining us on the show. Always enjoy talking to you.
Always a pleasure, Joe. Thanks so much for having me. I always enjoy talking about the Cats. And like we've talked about, it's been a great season so far, and looking forward to what's ahead. And you do a great job, so I appreciate you having me on. And hopefully Darren Williams and I will get you back on our podcast pretty soon.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. We've completed the home and home, so we need to sign a new contract for
there you go.
for the next series. Yeah, but always happy to do it. So looking forward to that as well. That is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra at D1Baseball.com. Thank you to Pitch Logic for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. Thank you again to Darren Headrick, Kentucky Radio Baseball play-by-play man, for joining us today, and thank you.